This is the First in the Trenches. I am Eric Laughlin. I'm a senior director here at Acorio, responsible for customer base and AMS. I'm responsible for growth in those areas of the organization. So I'm a sales guy. Today, I've brought with me for our very first my friend Jason Pierce. So, Jason, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, my friend?
Sure. Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate it. I'm Jason Pierce. I have been in the Workday ecosystem as HCM, compensation and recruiting since 2019. I've been in HRIS overall since 2006. So I've had the occasion during my time to be on both sides of the aisle. I've both been an implementation consultant with the client, meaning that's the company I work for, and of course, as an implementation consultant coming in to implement the software. That's given me a pretty good scope of what consulting looks like, or more accurately, what it should look like.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. I too was on the customer side. I purchased as customer number 476 back in the day, about 14, 15 years ago, and have been in
Nice.
consulting for the last 8 years. So we've got a lot of similarities in our background, but Jason's the guy to go under the hood in a tenant. He's got the expertise. I talk about the things at the high level. So what we're going to talk about today, folks, is in fact things that we have run into, which is mistakes that have occurred, that we've seen, lessons from the field, like those things that really we've seen customers slip up on, things they could have done differently. This is just us talking, the two of us talking about a practical approach. We're not going to get into theory or details of configuration, but what customers can do out of the gate when they're getting ready to go into implementation. We're also going to talk a little bit about the gaps in training and the things people should be doing when they're doing that new implementation. We're going to talk about the things that you should do after an implementation and how you can clean things up. So that's what we're going to chat about for maybe 20 minutes here or so. So, Jason, I think before a project begins, things can go wrong in that pre-sales process. What kind of things have you seen that customers mistakes, they didn't know they were making mistakes, but
Sure.
things that they could do differently so that future customers, people watching this podcast, could look at it and go, "Oh, I'm going to skip that mistake." So what are a couple quick points?
I think for me, the most important point really is making sure that you as an organization have buy-in from your functional people. A lot of times I've seen disconnects between the people that make the decision to bring in the product, bring in Workday, and the people who actually have to work with it.
Right.
And that can create some awkward scenarios. If you've got a client whose functional people are hostile to the product, they don't want to change. They're not interested in helping you. They don't want to ensure the success of the project. That creates a problem. And, from my perspective, I see that far too often where upper management does not really do a good job selling to those folks. And I think that they need to be as much a part of the pre-sales calls as anybody else. And that's something, of course, only the client can control that. Us as sales folks, we can't control who comes. But I think that's important. I think that you need that kind of buy-in in order to, just set the groundwork for success for these projects.
So it's not just a system decision. Choosing Workday is necessarily a system decision, but it goes beyond that. The executive alignment, ensuring the folks that are doing the work, the folks that are actually in the trenches. Uh,
Yeah.
Shameless plug for the name of the podcast there. It's
Nice.
not just that. It's not just
Yeah.
that. It's in fact a organizational readiness issue. Like
Yes.
really, that change management starts before the decision to sign the paper to buy Workday and to sign on with an implementer like Ocorio.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. And make sure that you understand, and as an organization, you are aligned on what problems you're solving.
Yep.
If you're bringing Workday in, it has to be for a reason. And we want to make sure that everyone's aligned on what's being solved. What are these pain points, and getting to those things early, even before we have a single session with the functional folks, really get everybody lined up. So that's a big deal.
Right. We've seen this area occur several times. You get onto a kickoff call and you have a specific area of the organization says, you have that strong personality on the call says, I didn't get to make this decision and I don't think we should be doing this. There was nothing wrong with system ABC. So
Exactly.
we see it a lot of times. So Folks, if you're looking at purchasing Workday and hiring a partner, make sure you have internal alignment first.
You'll be glad you
Very,
did.
very, very, in fact. Another gap that we see early on is once customers buy, Workday sells blocks of training hours. So we see customers delay or skip the recommended training frequently. And
Yes,
Jason, from your perspective, why does that cause such problems?
because it's so helpful to have that training at the appropriate time, especially beforehand, because that means there's a whole lot that we don't have to do. We have a very tight window for these projects, and we have to get in and explain the product, explain the process to you, and become part of the sales process for Workday, even as we're implementing it, because we're selling you as a user. So the more that they know up front, the more they have the understanding, the less work we have to do. So that allows us to focus on problem solving instead of focusing on having to constantly justify all these different decisions or,
Right.
have to really get into the weeds of understanding of how Workday works system. When you've had that training and you've seen what it does, it really helps set the table for us so that we can talk more freely about solving your specific problems rather than spending a lot of time going through the nuts and bolts of Workday and the whys and wherefore.
Right. So it to the customer, they're probably like, "Oh, we'll catch up on this later. We got to get this project started. We want the ROI. We got to get the project going. This is going to be
Right.
6 months, a year." So they think it's something they can do later.
And that's too late. I mean, it's by that time you're so far into it that the training at that point, then you're like, well, wait, why we didn't know this and we didn't know that because we're not trainers. I mean, we'll show you, but that's different than training. Because we have objectives in every meeting we're in. Hopefully, we do. For otherwise, we're wasting your time, and we have things we need to get accomplished. So the more you know up front, it just makes it more and more helpful for us. And there's nothing worse than getting to the end of a project, you're getting ready to go live, and all of a sudden you have this dawning horror that, oh my God, we didn't account for this, that, and the other thing. If only we had known, right? And sometimes those things are hard to tease out during discovery calls with us. But if you've been trained already, you already have an understanding of the system, those things will come forward more easily. You have them a lot less often.
Sure, sure. And Workday nomenclature is a little bit different than other systems, right? So
Yep.
learning, what does multiple jobs actually mean in Workday compared to some other system?
What is the
Understanding,
job? What is the
yeah,
position? What do you
exactly.
mean by that? Right.
Job
Exactly.
families,
Jobs and
right?
groups,
So
families, all that. Absolutely.
yeah, so getting the basics, understanding the nomenclature, knowing how the system works out of the gate, especially for those core project folks,
It can only help
is
you.
it will. And then, what I've seen is the real learning of the system happens during testing. Those
Yes.
folks that have taken training on the front end and then are in testing at the end of a project, those become the subject matter experts at the customer side.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great point too. That leads right into another subject. One of the biggest pitfalls that happens during a project, and this happens in the very beginning. So in the same way that you need to get the buy-in from your functional folks, you also have to express to them internally that, hey, this is going to be a commitment.
Right.
We need that testing, and that testing has to be done by them. We can't do it for you. And if you don't test it, and then you get to another stage and all of a sudden something's not working, the longer into the process it is, the more expensive it is to be having to remediate it.
Right.
And if we don't have that time commitment from them that they're willing to spend on that testing, that's going to be a bottleneck. And that's where the training you just referenced is invaluable because then they're not spending time understanding navigation. They're not understanding time getting in. They get in, they find the test, they execute it, they give you the results. We adjust where necessary and go forward. Just makes that all important process. It's so much smoother, and it saves a lot of time on these projects. You get a way more accurate product. And it helps us as consultants. It's when we're trying to translate between each other, the more you know offhand, the easier it is on us.
Exactly. Exactly. So that testing, that's where reality shows up, right? When we sit down and we do discovery sessions with the client at the beginning of the projects, and we're laying out how different business processes will work, how it best supports the organization. It's that testing is where the rubber meets the road. It is, this is what's in the system. This is how we expect it to operate. This is how it actually operated, and
Right.
making the adjustments from there after end to end. So
Absolutely.
yeah, testing is huge, and I think it also ties into how much time do people have available between their day jobs and their project work. Right? We see a big disconnect, and one of the things that Workday does, and we at Choreo also do, is say to folks, you should expect to spend X amount of time on this project. If you're
Yes.
the HCM leader, if you're the benefits lead, if you're the payroll lead, if you're the internal customer project managers, do you see folks struggle with that day to day? I have a day job and I'm on this really important project. Do you see folks,
Absolutely.
and what advice would you give them to balance?
Well, a lot of it does come down to timing. And look, at the time you're setting up, when you're going into this, when you're going into this implementation, be aware that your benefits folks are going to have open enrollment. Your payroll folks are going to have year end. There are seasons for these things, for these different functional groups. And so you as an organization have to say, well, look, if we need staff log at this time, or if we need to make changes in terms of how this rolls out, we are conscious of that. And look, as consultants, we understand that. I often say during meetings, look, I know you have day jobs. I understand that. This is my job. This is not your job. Your job, you're
Right.
part of the project, but ultimately, um, you do have a day job, and you have to get these things done with us. And so we as consultants try to smooth that road as much as possible to make sure there's not a lot of retesting, to try to make sure that you go through tests maybe one or two times tops, and then you're done, and we have the delivered product. What you've described to us is what we've delivered, right? But that is something to be conscious of, especially again, if you're going full suite and you've got payroll, benefits, and all these different modules. You have to be aware of the yearly calendar and understand when they're going to be constrained and when they're not, and time that accordingly.
I think one of the other things that we see often is trying to build the perfect business process, and making sure that the approvals are all in there. And I think we both run into a scenario like this where a customer says, and the CEO needs to be on that approval.
Make sure the CEO is on every approval.
And 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 you come to find out that the CEO doesn't do all the approvals, and 6 months into a project they're saying, why do I have all
Right.
these emails, notifications, and why does HR keep calling me?
Right. Why is my email box flooded? What is this exactly? And that's funny because something that I always say to my clients, I say, look, I'm telling you out front, the way you're going to use Workday at the very beginning, and we're going to lead you in that direction. We're always going to push back on you to say, are you sure you want to do that? And here's why you might not want to. That's where it bleeds into the best practice discussion. But I always tell them, look, the way you use Workday at go live, it's going to be quite different than the way you use it a year from then, because it's just it's impossible for you to test every conceivable permutation of every possible business situation in a 6 month period with a go live. That's
Right.
just not reasonable, right? So we get you to working, and then use it for a while, right? Get that AMS add-on. Then later on, you come back and say, you know what? We've been using this for a couple months. We've got data on it. We got feedback from our users. We have a well-developed change management process. We talk to people where their pain points are. This is what we've got. Let's talk about making these updates. And that's the wonder of the system, is it's so iterative and grows with you. You can change with you. That makes it the perfect candidate for those kinds of changes. So we can go in and make those updates. So maybe the CEO doesn't need every approval. Right? Maybe these people can do that, or maybe you have thresholds and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean that's definitely something to consider as you're doing this, knowing that you're going to go live with X, but that's going to change over time because it has to, and it will.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, the approvals in your system will move at the speed of the human interaction of approvals. That's how fast is your
Right.
process? It's as fast as people do the approval.
Where are the bottlenecks?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's one thing for folks that are already live and who might be watching, listening. The folks are already live. If you found those bottlenecks, and they happen in every implementation, it's that design to perfection business process that can be optimized and enhanced and changed. We're here for you on that. We have a
Absolutely.
process that we call Dr. Workday Hit or Choreo, which gives us the ability to go in. We do a free assessment, and then it's obviously a paid engagement after that, where we can go into your system, take a look. Somebody like Jason can look under your hood and give you some recommendations from our depth of experience in doing Workday for so long. So many folks in our practice have been in this ecosystem for a very long time. We can go in, make real world recommendations to you, and adjust your system for you and with you. So those you know those approvals and the bottlenecks, those lead into that post 1, 2, 3 years after go live. And I've seen some customers, Jason, I'm sure you've seen this too, who don't do a lot of changes with Workday as their business changes, right?
Right.
Every corporation is setting monthly, annual, 3 or 5 year goals. Are they setting their stack, their tech stack to support those goals for HCM, for financials? Are they setting those processes to support the organization, support the employee engagement, support the growth? Or are they just running a system over and over again? So I think both of us have seen we're typically after go live, customers either A, pivot and make changes, or B, sit on it and complain. So what are some post go live realities that maybe you'd like to talk about?
Sure. Well, I think as far as when after you've gone live and you use the product for a little bit and you're looking at things that are happening, don't think in terms of Workday, any issue with it as something you have to now get around, right? You should never build a process involving Workday that's outside of Workday, right? This system is made to grow with you and change. So if something needs to change, if something is not working the way you're expecting, don't, just say, well, we're going to have to do something else. Change it. That's the beauty of it. It will change with you. Everything's effective dated. So we can say, this was the reality on this day. This is the new reality on this day. Here are the things we're going to address. And dovetailing with your comments on approvals, the other one that we get a lot of pushback on is notifications.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be notified until they got an inbox full of notifications going, my goodness, where are all these coming from? And so, when we're doing this work with you, we always say, keep your notifications targeted and specific. Don't send them a notification on everything because Workday will be thrilled to send it to you. But if too many becomes noise, it just becomes meaningless, and then you lose the function, and then people are annoyed with it. And so, really, part of your sales process for you as a client internally selling this to your people is you have to sell what it's solving for you. You don't want to sell them another headache. You want this to be. I always throw this out whenever I'm talking to a client, and I know it's cliche, but it's just what I say, right? Have you ever taken a class on how to use your Amazon app on your phone? No.
Nope.
Right. That needs to be the design. You need to think and make this as intuitive as possible. Keep the fewest possible steps you can, get as much automation as possible, right? And think that way because we're going to be gone after this project. We implement and then we're gone. You hire us for AMS, we're there, but we're not there on a day-to-day basis with you. And somebody's going to have to come behind and start using this as their everyday go-to tool. It's the carpenter's hammer. So it has to have that level of intuitiveness to it with those processes. And you want to think about that when we're going through these designs. Make it simple, easy, and give as much information to the people as you possibly can to make it as smooth an experience as possible.
Excellent. Go live is really the starting point. It's not an end point.
Yes.
It's a destination on a journey, not the destination.
Yeah.
Jason had mentioned AMS, so our post production services. We've got a really robust approach, very dedicated consultants who are helping our customers. It's really fun to get to know customers and spend a little bit of time with them every week and help them along their journey and be really a partner to them, not just a vendor, but a partner with them.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of things today. I think that we've hit on several topics. We talked about executive alignment and the approach right out of the gate. We talked about employees getting trained before the project kicks off or very early on in the project, so that the testing period is where the depth of learning really comes about the system, the processes, and what the organization is going to have in the future. We talked a lot about time commitment and the fact that it's not the day job. It's the day job plus the project for a lot of folks. We talked a little bit about bottlenecking with approvals. We see this quite frequently. We talked a little bit about that post go live support, the need to keep growing the system with your business. Before we close out, Jason, any last words of wisdom for our several followers? If we even have 10, maybe, we're working towards growing this, so it's
More than
yeah,
I have.
exactly.
So last thing I would say is this. As I mentioned earlier, all the free work you can do is invaluable. Meeting with everybody and getting them all in the room together. Is the earlier you start talking about what you do as an organization with everybody in the room, the more you're going to hear things like, I didn't know you were doing that. I didn't know you were doing that. It's amazing how often that happens. Organizations, it's just the nature of how it works, often silo themselves and, or other parts of the organization don't know what the other people are doing and don't know where information is coming from or don't know how these things are happening. And so the earlier you meet and vet these things out, you find those things during implementation where you go, oh my gosh, the whole time this was happening. Well, here's how we'll design that, right? And we expect that cross-functional impact. So again, as early as you can start talking about it internally and getting everybody aligned, you will thank yourself later.
Spectacular. So in short, the difference between a really difficult implementation and a successful one is how you prepare up front, how well aligned the organization is for it, the partner you select, and then how you work together going through.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, Jason, thank you so much for joining the In the Trenches podcast. For our watchers out there, if you're preparing for a Workday project or trying to get more out of Workday after go live, these are the kind of challenges that we're helping our customers here at Choreo through. So please do us a favor, like, follow, subscribe, mash whatever button you like on whatever platform you are on, and we'll see you next time in the trenches. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Bye-bye now.
Appreciate you.